And it says, once again,
we are live.
Imagine
well,
that.
We hope so. We never give up hope.
We're all George. How's everybody doing today?
Hello, darlings.
Happy anniversary week of Ed Sullivan, 9th of Feb.
That's
which
right.
is very apropos for our wonderful guest today.
Yes. She was actually there, wasn't she?
Absolutely.
On that famous night.
We'll talk all about it.
She'll tell you about it.
Debbie Gendler, now Supnick, is a 4-time Emmy-nominated talent and development executive and producer, formerly at CBS New York and Los Angeles and ABC, and she also served in Women in Film LA's first executive director. Debbie is responsible for developing over 9,000 episodes of television. She doesn't look old enough.
Oh, my goodness.
With Grossman Productions for over 36 broadcast and cable networks, including the launches of Home and Garden Television, Nat Geo in the US. And identifying talent and building show concepts is Debbie's expertise, with many of today's notable hosts and experts being introduced to networks by Debbie. Hey, do you want to be my agent? As an original Beatle fan who was in the studio on that fateful night, February 9th, 1964, as we'll talk about today, for the group's first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, she's given countless interviews on TV, radio, and now TeaFlix, including the CBS Grammy 50th Beatle anniversary show, where her interview traveled around the world as part of a Grammy exhibit, and on the accompanying DVD to Ron Howard's feature documentary on the Beatles. Now, 61 years later, I guess, since Ed Sullivan, Debbie works as a co-producer at Sofa Entertainment with the wonderful Mr. Andrew Salt.
Oh, yeah.
And they own The Ed Sullivan Show and all the archives. Debbie is a magna cum laude graduate of Boston University's College of Communication, and she lives in Beverly Hills with her husband. And without further ado, the crowd goes wild for Debbie Gendler. Welcome, Debbie.
Hi, Debbie. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
It's a pleasure. We're glad we found each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, gosh, harking back to when we were talking during our tech test, I guess it's 61 years ago this week, which is impossible because you're only 55.
Right. Thank you.
In utero, we'll say you were at the.
So tell us about how you came to go to the show.
Yeah, how did you get tickets?
Okay.
How did you hear about them? And tell me the whole story. I want to know the color of shoes you were wearing, where you sat, the whole dang thing.
I actually remember the color shoes. What happened is my parents' best friend, I lived in New Jersey, and my parents' best friends decided to take a trip to London. Their older daughter was sort of, even though I was already 13, my sort of babysitter, when my parents went out in the evening, so I wouldn't have to be alone. Their daughter came and after school or whatever. And she always watched American Bandstand. So of course she was a lot older than me. I was watching American Bandstand. So her parents thought, she loves music. Well, not really, but anyway, they went into a record store in London and they went in, asked the fellow there working, who is the best-selling record now in England. And he told them these fellows from up north. And he handed her a Please Please Me album and said, buy this and take it home to her. So they did. They brought me this, compared to my mother's gift, a beautifully wrapped Fortnum and Mason teas. They handed me this brown thing, the shape of an album, but like an oiled thick paper tied with a string. And I thought it was pretty ugly, but I said, I'll look at it. And I opened it up in front of them. And I have to tell you, where I said my heart sort of went boom, it did. I was 13 and I saw for me the 4 cutest guys I had ever seen. Now, I didn't hear the music yet. I just saw how cute they were compared to Bobby Bell, Bobby Van, Bobby Vinton, all of them. They had a spark of a whole different thing. Yeah. So that's how I first got introduced to them. This was May 1963.
Wow.
And the only obstacle was to find someone else in my town in New Jersey to love this group as much as I did. I couldn't find anyone.
How funny.
But
Yeah.
inside of the album was a little piece of paper that if you love the Beatles, join their fan club with an address. And after like several weeks of being not just told my friends didn't like the Beatles, but being ridiculed about the Beatles. Ridiculed.
Seems funny now.
In our local supermarket, I fondly remember this girl's mom coming up to my mother and I and telling me, I don't want you to be friends with my daughter anymore because you're a bad influence. You keep talking about this singing group who have long hair. They're a bad influence. So you know what? At our 50th high school reunion, it was hilarious. The girl was there and she and I really laughed about it. But what everyone knew, and I started to get labeled a weirdo and a crazy girl and couldn't be friends with her. So meanwhile, I went and wrote a letter to the fan club. Can I find friends who love the Beatles?
Wow.
Never heard back. And sorry to make it long, but this will bring it up to Ed Sullivan quickly.
That's great.
Okay. And I never heard anything. I went away to sleepaway camp for 8 weeks in the summer to Maine and never heard anything. Every letter home. But I remember the fan club address. And while we went on a field trip, everyone bought postcards to send home to their parents, not me. I bought this postcard. I paid 15 cents because it was 5 cents to mail a letter then.
Oh, wow.
And so I bought 3 stamps, wrote airmail, and I wrote Beatles Fan Club, 13 Monmouth Street, London, England. And I wrote, hi, Beatle fans. Remember me, Debbie Gendler, Oakland, New Jersey. Remember me. And never heard even from that until it was Halloween that year in '63. I come home. My mom's standing at the front door waiting for me with a yellow piece of paper. And it was a Western Union telegram from a lawyer in New York that the Beatles management was planning a trip to New York to solidify appearances, and they were looking for fans. Could I come to a meeting? So I begged my mother to call to respond, which she very kindly did without really an argument at all. And she called and arranged for me to go in early November to go meet this group who were looking for Beatles fans. That's how I knew I was going. And the day of, my dad drove me to New York, not my mom. And it was really an interesting day because I happened to have no school. It was Veterans Day. And schools in New Jersey were closed to honor the veterans. So I didn't miss school. He drove me into New York, 26 miles away. I went to the lawyer's office, and in the distance in the conference room were 3 men speaking with the most beautiful British accents, because I had never heard.
No problem.
I had never heard
Brian
in person an accent like that, only on TV or things like that, never a person in front of me. And I sat there, I kept thinking how beautiful the accent is. And I met Brian and I called him Mr. Epstein, because that's what they told me his name was at the front reception desk. I did not even know his name till then. And he goes, no, not Epstein, Epstein. I said, I'm so sorry, Mr. Epstein. So here I am, 13 years old, there, my dad. And of course, he sees, I can't officially, I'm too young to really start a fan club, go to work. I don't know what they were expecting, but it was like a 15, 20-minute meeting. My lasting impression was Brian's gold cufflinks.
Oh, yes. Ever the gentleman.
He was wearing the most magnificent gold cufflinks. And I was led out being thanked. And the lawyer's name was Walter Hoffer. His secretary called me over to her desk and said, Mr. Hoffer says we are going to need you in the future. We want to make sure I have your address, your phone number, everything correct.
Wow.
And we will need you at some point. And and this is how I know the date that this happened, and I keep telling Andrew Solt this when he starts questioning, what day did Brian really solidify the day of going on Ed Sullivan? Well, I know because the secretary told me, if Mr. Epstein signs or just agrees, I don't think there was a signature, but
does the deal.
The deal that afternoon when he visits Mr. Sullivan at his hotel,
right?
Then we will send you a ticket to the show.
Oh, wow.
That's how I got my ticket, was because of that letter. And in the end, they sent me a single ticket to go.
Not two.
That's how, not two. My mom waited for me outside in a coffee shop that was diagonally across Broadway.
Oh, that's just amazing. But you see, what that proves is never, ever give up on your dream. Persistence. If you hadn't sent that 15-cent airmail postcard, that meeting with Brian might never have happened and the ticket would never have happened. Right. So, again, it's a lesson that carries forward to this day. I'm writing a symposium curriculum at the moment for business students, and with allegories to the Beatles. And it's just never, ever give up. Be persistent, be nice, be polite, but be persistent, state who you are, what you want, communicate clearly. Obviously, you're a communications expert and major, but it will pay off in the end. It's amazing.
Yeah. Actually, I totally, believe in the power of writing a letter.
Oh, yeah.
And even in this world of emails, I have to tell you that sometimes the letter gets through and it gets noticed because it's so unique now versus just an email that gets lost in a stack of emails. So it really goes back to this email. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So fast forward the few months in between, which unfortunately, include JFK, right? And the loss of that wonderful man, and probably the most miserable Thanksgiving and Christmas America had in a very long time.
Yes.
Do you remember when it was announced that February 9th would actually be the date? Because between November 11th and 12th, which is the Veterans Day, right around there, the deal would have been done. Mm-hmm. In February, I was talking to a few guests recently saying, what do you think the holdup was? And they posited that it was just that Ed Sullivan's show was booked that far out in advance.
Yes.
And the Beatles had tour dates in Paris and England and Sweden. And they couldn't make it work. How did you get a phone call saying it's going to be February 9th and here's your ticket? How did that next portion of the journey happen?
I think that word got out about the Ed Sullivan Show appearance in the date in early January. And I think it was, remember, we had no internet, so the only way that we could get information was through teen magazines, which were greatly delayed, and local DJs. And so you had disc jockeys on the big stations, at least in New York, Cousin Bruce Morrow on WABC, the WACA Good Guys, and of course, my personal favorite, Murray the K.
Murray the K, yeah.
Murray the K. announced that the Beatles would be on the Ed Sullivan Show. I
Right.
think that is how the word, because remember, right in mid-December, the DJs all across the country really started playing I Want to Hold Your Hand in frequent rotation. And that's how the build began. So the word really got out, I believe, and how I really found out that it was going to be February 9th was through the DJs. Now, what is, interesting is that I didn't take an adult's word for the fact that I would get a ticket.
The ticket, yeah.
But there were 50,000 requests. However, for 728 seats in the theater, 50,000 requests. I also joined the group of writing letters requesting tickets for February 9th, along with the 49,900 whatever.
Yeah.
Every day I was writing letters, and I was getting nervous. So I did call Walter Hoffer's office twice, and I was told, your ticket's going to be in the mail. Your ticket's in the mail. I said, okay, fine. I hope so. But, and sure enough, yes, my ticket did finally come, but not until a week before.
Nail biting.
So I was beginning, I had this wonderful little dog. I had no other brothers or sisters. The dog was like my brother. And I remember telling him at night, my ticket isn't going to come. My ticket isn't going to come. And being so upset. However, the people around me at school who always thought I was some weird, crazy person, I finally got a couple of girls to be friends really with me again, who started to love the Beatles. And then, of course, just the day after I went to the show and I came back I went to school on that Monday morning. The first thing, I walked into school and I was told, you're requested to go to the vice principal's office.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, no, because he was the school disciplinarian. And I must tell you, just last week, someone sent me his obit. He had passed away, but last week. But he called me into his office, and instead of, reprimanding me, he said, I've heard that you have a Beatles album from England. Can you bring it to school tomorrow so I can play it during lunchtime in the school cafeteria?
How progressive of him.
I truly went from just having a couple of these friends who ate with me to suddenly in one day, like this incredibly popular person, that my basement became like, Beatles Central in town and talking about it and doing this and that. And of course, I sort of had the inroad, having met Brian and kept in touch with Walter Hoffer's office, who then moved from 55th Street to 57th Street in March of 64. And the fan club, until Brian joined up with Nat Weiss and Walter Hoffer out of the picture. Walter, his wife, Sandra, and Brian were the original directors of Beatles USA Limited, the club and things, the three of them. But then over the merchandising mess, Brian grew dissatisfied with Walter Hoffer and what was going on. He met up then with Nat Weiss, who then moved in. There was a dissolution of with Walter Hoffer, his wife, and Brian. But when it was at the very beginning, the fan club was run out of Walter Hoffer's law.
I never knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, really? It was run out of Walter Hoffer's law office at 221 West 57th Street. a
Okay.
very secret place that was just a few years ago. The building was torn down to make
Oh.
for Nordstrom's.
Oh.
Nordstrom's moved in, tore down the building, but
So,
that's sort of what happened.
so take me back to the day of. You wake up in the morning all excited. You tell your dog, "I've got a ticket. I'm going."
Right, exactly.
How do
Yeah.
how do you decide what to wear? And it was
Yeah.
obviously freezing cold February in New York, so you'd have to be well wrapped up. And did you have to stand outside online to get in? And where did you sit? And all of it.
Okay. Well, Sunday morning, I got up and I had been working on what I was going to wear the whole time. And I finally decided, those were the days that people dressed to go to a TV show. You
Sure.
didn't, wear pants and a sweater. So I chose a very nice skirt and top. My mom gave me a necklace to wear. So I remember wearing her necklace because, of course, if the Beatles saw me, oh my goodness, one of the Beatles. Couldn't it be love at first sight, right? But no, I didn't delude myself that much. But I thought, maybe though I could go to England and get a beautiful British accent, because I was so taken with that for the first meeting. That's all I thought about was getting that accent. And anyway, my mom drove me that day across the George Washington Bridge, and we got to New York. We got into a parking space. We started to walk to the Studio 50. It wasn't called Ed Sullivan Theater yet. Went to Studio 50 and walking along to Broadway. And all of a sudden there were hordes of kids racing up Broadway and across 51st Street and 52nd Street running to the theater. It was about 10 to 6 or so. I think we had to be there by 6:15 is what the ticket said. So this was shortly before 6. We came up to barricades. There were police officers on big horses
Crowd control.
who were stopping everyone. I could see off to my left that people were arriving like in limos and big cars, getting out and going in. Meanwhile, my mother and I, who were on foot, are dealing with this officer on a horseback. My mom, who said she was 5'2", but I have to tell you, in actuality, was maybe just 5'1", but she would never admit to being 5'1", but saying 5'2", right? Is looking up at this police officer on the horse and saying, "We have a ticket. We have a ticket." And she's showing him the ticket and he's saying, "Hold it up higher." Well, anyway, he finally said and there's a whole little story that goes on with it, but not to get into it for time issues. He said, "Okay, fine." My mom gave me a little push through and there were 2 kids who were tugging on me in the back of my coat and boom. And I went in. There's a vestibule. I remember the wind. It was really windy in the vestibule. Someone there took my ticket. And I said, "Please, could I have part of my ticket?" No tickets. We keep them all. Okay, fine. No tickets. Tickets were not kept. No one. I've been told that there is only one ticket around, and that was Walter Cronkite's ticket, who brought his 2 daughters to meet the Beatles. And that one, they believe, was never retrieved. But I have no idea where it is, if one of his daughters have it or not, okay?
Yeah.
I was directed to the left. There was a staircase going up the left, and I was directed to the left. Meanwhile, I saw all these people going into the orchestra. And I said, why can't I go there? I'm thinking to myself. And then I said, I'll just follow instructions. So I went up the stairs and I went to the mezzanine. I was about 3 rows back at the mezzanine. A wonderful seat in the end, wonderful, because the Beatles were looking up at us all the time, up, and the mezzanine was divided. Mezzanine was sort of in front, then there was a walkway, and then the rest of the balcony, but hard to see the division. It wasn't very wide. So I was in the front,
Great.
And I, went there thinking I'm going to try and be an adult.
Yeah.
And be there. Oh, that was impossible. I'm now back in touch with some of the people who were sitting around me, and they remember conversations we had. And there were these 4 girls, one of whom is sort of sitting behind me, and they're all bouncing and other people bouncing. Well, hey, you know what? I was 13 years old. I couldn't sit there. And we, screamed and screamed and screamed.
Wow.
It was wonderful, wonderful. And I have the way of the British accents and Brian's cufflinks. I remember, obviously, of course, when the Beatles entered, but there's one thought I had, and I always sort of attribute it to the fact I went into TV. I remember watching the monitor, which was up towards my right.
Uh-huh.
And there was so much screaming. There was an ad for Anacin, headache medication, Anacin at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, the people that work there are really going to need that product.
That's funny. That's funny. Marianne is asking, do you happen to be in any of the footage of the audience that day?
Very interesting question. There are some audience shots here and there, but never determined if it's me or not because things went by. So I sort of say, no, not really, because I wasn't in any of the close-ups or shots like that. Yeah. So
there may be archival footage somewhere. They probably shot the whole balcony and the whole mezzanine, the whole audience.
I'm gonna say no, that I'm really not there. And no one ever told me after the show, like my dad or any of my friends, oh, we saw you. So I attribute it, no, I don't think so. But the gals behind me certainly remember me, and they remember our conversations. So I defer to them.
Ashley is asking, he's down in Alabama. He's curious. David Letterman always kept the theater extremely cold, like a refrigerator. How was it during the Sullivan Show, or were you just so excited you don't remember the temperature?
Oh, no. We definitely remember the temperature. Okay. It was freezing cold. Huh. It was frigid. And at the theater, there's a big discussion amongst the whole group of us that I've sort of tried to assemble a group of people who were there for Andrew Salt and for his Ed Sullivan Show archives. And I've made contact with about 20 of them. And we can't, and there's one gal, Bridget Sarnoff, and her sister, Anne. The 2 of us were always talking online. What did we do with our coats? We are sort of remembering that there was a coat check downstairs in the theater where many of us left our coats.
Wow.
And so we think that's what we probably did, is leave our coats down there. And so we went up, and I've tried to look at the footage very closely to see, and I've seen some people who have coats and some people who don't. So, but yes, it was very, very cold. I do remember that.
Oh. Isn't that funny? I wonder why they keep it like that, because, it's not like, mind you, they had their big Klieg lights in the day that used to heat the place up, I suppose. But that's very, very strange. So you were just talking about looking at the monitor and getting into television. Fast forward to what you do now, which is quite incredible that Andrew Salt was able to buy the Ed Sullivan archives. Yeah. How did that come about, and how did you meet? How long have you known Andrew, and what do you sort of do day to day as far as historical fact checking and stuff?
Yeah. Well, I met Andrew in about 1986. Andrew was beginning to do a project with Yoko and David Wolper, a theatrical documentary called Imagine.
Right, I remember.
I got called in. He won many awards for that project. And I got called in to help him obtain a few pictures that he wanted to have special use of, that they were lacking youthful shots of John, and I helped facilitate the acquisition of those photographs, okay? And I met Andrew back then in the 80s. Me as a, devoted Beatle fan, always kept in touch and everything. In 1990, the Sullivan family, Bob Prick, his son-in-law, who was executive producer with Ed of the show for many years of its running, decided to sell. And Andrew found out about it, and Andrew bought the rights of the show in 1990.
Wow.
He's owned it since then. In 2010, and I had, through all that, really kept, contact with Andrew on and off. There was like a Beatles question he'd ask me, for like whatever. So in 2010, though, Andrew, I think it was then, put out a series of the 4 Beatles performances. Jeez, I wish I had a copy here to show you. I do, but it's in my closet right there. But 4 Beatles shows in their entirety with commercials, okay? And it was put out with in conjunction with Universal Music. And Andrew asked me to go and do some promotion for it, knowing that I had a seat in the audience.
Right. That's fantastic. I looked at edsullivan.com the other day. It's I hate to say it because we build websites all day long, but it's really well done. And it's very accessible. There's just so much content there. It's incredible.
It is so much content. The show aired from 1948 to 1971.
Wow.
Did it run that long?
Well over 10,000 performances. And obviously, the Beatles, Elvis, the Stones, the Doors, Janis Joplin, Animals, Mamas and Papas. He loved the Supremes. They were on so many times. And then the comedians, from Richard Pryor to Rodney Dangerfield to Henny Youngman, Alan King. It's just, amazing what, and Stiller and Mira, what, was on the show. It is a joy. And what I've been doing is, in conjunction with Universal Music for several years now, we've launched edsullivan.com, and they own, music and can clear copyrights, and we have performances, and we've launched edsullivan.com, and we do a lot of streaming. The Ed Sullivan shows on Pluto TV, just launched on Roku. We do things with Sirius XM. I really have a very busy job, and I don't mind my age. Angie and Ruth, I must tell you, I welcome my age, because I work with editors who do the funniest things. Like, for instance, we were doing a clip with the Animals, and although everyone knew they came from, or at least I knew they came from Newcastle, showing footage of London. I said, no, they didn't grow up there. So that's a little bit why I mentioned my age. That's a little bit what I do, is put a reality check to know who, and it moves away from, British invasion as well. It happens with, from Peggy Lee to Pearl Bailey to Holly Bergen to, Morgan. He loved Morecambe and Wise, beloved English comedians.
Love them too.
And they were on,
That's amazing. Well, I think it's important, and I think it speaks very highly of Mr. Salt and the brand and his custodianship, that he has somebody like you who has real world, archivist knowledge, that he cares enough about the brand. So many people nowadays just slap something up there on Instagram, buy now, and they don't give a crap about authenticity or When you go to edsullivan.com, honestly, I spent hours on there on the weekend.
Yes, I did too.
After I'd spoken to you, you can see how much love and care has gone into that brand.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the Sullivan family must be very happy that they let Sofa Entertainment acquire it, because if they'd have just sold it to some, faceless conglomerate somewhere, it wouldn't be half as good. But you can really feel the love in that website.
No,
it's
wonderful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And thank you for keeping it real.
Thank you, Andrew, and now his son Josh sold, who basically oversees the day-to-day operation of it. They care very deeply to make sure it's authentic and the best information and keeping it entertaining. So we constantly try and update it and do it with new, new graphics and give it a new life, but yet keep the integrity of what the
absolutely, yes,
the
wonderful.
retro stuff. Ashley's asking, do you remember the Oliver performance with Davy Jones?
Oh, very clearly, very clearly. Okay, so after the Beatles were over and we were told, oh, they're coming back. And then when it went to a break, Ed Sullivan came back and said, you have to, be quiet and really appreciate all the other acts in the show. And there were a lot of Brits on the show, if you think about it.
Tessie O'Shea
as well, who of course we didn't care about. Poor Mitzi McCall and Charlie Brill, the comedians. That was terrible for them. And they were actually on Ed Sullivan, and I did a interview with them for our Sullivan archives, and they tell great stories about that, with John Lennon knocking on their door, their rehearsing door, standing there asking, "Do you have a dime for a Coke?" One wanted a Coke, and he didn't know how to get it out of the machine. So he knocked on their door asking for a dime. Yeah. But with Davy Jones, I so remember that, because we were happy. At least it was a British, again, inspired kind of thing. So I would say, on a whole, the Fred Capps, the magician, we didn't care about the others. But with Oliver, we listened to that because we sort of were informed or knew that it was like a British thing.
Another cute young British boy.
Yeah, right.
That sounds like, the poor other variety acts like Tessie O'Shea and the people you mentioned. What an absolute nightmare to go out and know you're going to be just bomb in front of a bunch of screaming teenagers, right? Yeah. It reminds me of the time I was in I had a dancing troupe. I was a choreographer way back when. And we used to open for people in the in the North, in these working men's clubs, they were called, but they were kind of like, they were like mini Vegas casinos, like the Batley Variety Club and Fagan's Manchester. And they had all the mod cons, and, they were to do with the railroad unions or the electricians unions, but they had all this money and they built these social clubs. And so we used to go out there. I was, 16 or something. We do all of our dancing to the top 40 hits to warm up the audience. Everybody come in and get a drink. So we're out there about to go out. It's August 1970. I'm going to get the year wrong, but someone will correct me. Sure. And I'm about to go out, August 16th, and the guy with his flat cap, the MC, came out and he said, "Is this thing on?" They bang the microphone. "Is this thing?" "Well, before we welcome the next ladies, I've got a bit of news for you. It's a bit of a shocker out of Memphis, but ladies and gentlemen, Elvis is dead. Now, please put your hands together for Ruth McCartney and talent." And I have to dance out on the stage, like pretending to be all that. And he's just said, "Elvis is dead. Now, please give a big round."
All flying in the bear,
So I kind of know what Tessie O'Shea must have felt like.
Mitzi McCall told me in that interview and then subsequent conversations, she said she was so happy with Charlie because they were told by their agent, they lived in LA, that they were booked on the Sullivan Show. They thought it was their big chance. This was it to hit the big time. And when they got there, when they got to the studio, they still had never heard about the Beatles. When they walked in, Mitzi said she said to Charlie, "Wow, Frank Gorshin must have a lot of fans," because he did invitations on the show, and they attributed all the fans to Frank Gorshin.
Oh, funny. That's wild. Peter's asking, did Ed Sullivan, was he a fan of the Dave Clark Five at all?
Oh, well, I wish I knew more. I really can't say if he did. The Dave Clark Five was, of course, booked on his show. I do watch the Dave Clark Five performances every once in a while, but, I don't think they were as much favorites as obviously the Beatles were. When Ed went to England for other business, he stopped by the set of A Hard Day's Night to conduct an interview with the Beatles. He was on a long-term kind of thing. I don't think he and Dave Clark kept as close as he was to the Beatles or even the Stones. He loved the Stones. He did. And even when he got them to change the lyrics, which was really the CBS standards and practices, who didn't let's spend the night together and substituted let's spend the time together. But Ed really liked the Stones after someone on his staff, Vince Calandra, went over to the Stones and told them they really should clean up or they weren't coming back, but they should clean up. And if they cleaned up, they could come back on the show.
Oh, that's wild.
Haven't times changed?
And Ashley's just saying he introduced them at Shea Stadium in '65.
He sure did. He sure did. Ed introduced them then, and Cousin Brucey though was there too in '65 and did a bit of an introduction as well in '65. But Ed was there too, and Ed always stayed involved with the Beatles throughout his whole career.
We all have Ed to thank for bringing them to America. We were all very aware of them in England, but in those days we didn't have international communications. There was no, internet. John Lennon used to say he'd occasionally come and stay at our place in Wirral, and we used to get a lot of the Paul fan club delivered to our house, and Ange would sort it out, and I would help making pocket money and stapling the envelope to the letter, because the Americans always put the address on the envelope and not on the letter. So if you lose the envelope, they get orphaned. And John would come and sit sometimes underneath our dining table and look at all of the banker's boxes of mail with labels of the countries on, and he'd muse and say, God, if we could only ask them what they want. We would now say poll the audience or run a poll, run an Instagram poll. But John was like, which song do they like the best? Which one should we put out as a single? What do they want more of? What do they not like? Do they like our hair longer or shorter? I mean, he really he used to call them customers.
The customers, he always
he used to say, I wish we could ask the customers what they want.
Yes.
Well, hey, we were customers. Walter Shenson, who produced the Beatles 2 movies, Hard Day's Night Now, was like my dearest, dearest, dearest friend, although he was exactly the age of my mom and dad. But he was my dearest, dearest friend, especially when I moved to LA and he was already living here. And he would come to visit me at home. And he came into my dining room one day, the first time actually he came to the house. And I had a big poster of my original poster of A Hard Day's Night movie. And as a customer would say, okay, he pointed to it and he said, that movie is going to be mine one day, because he did, after 15 years, get the whole film. But he pointed to the Hard Day's Night poster. He said, that's really mine because it's part of what the film is. And I looked out at his blue and white Rolls Royce parked out front of my house, and I said, Walter, that is really mine.
Yeah,
Hey, we
exactly.
had all paid so much. He's driving a Rolls Royce. Guess what, Walter? That poster, yeah, is yours, and your Rolls Royce
Is
belongs to
mine.
me.
I love it. I love it. So tell the folks where they can, obviously we have your information streaming across the bottom, debbiegendler.com. There's lots and lots of great pictures and stuff, and you can buy Debbie's book there. And wait, did the title, I saw them standing there, did it just hit you out of the blue, or did you have to work on that one?
I have to be honest with you. That came from the book publisher, or
Okay,
actually
great
the
title.
literary agent. I had two other titles in mind, okay? One was, Who's Your Favorite Beatle?
Okay.
Because I have to tell you, if I haven't been asked that 1.5 million times.
Sorry.
Honestly, who's your favorite Beatle? I thought I had to do that as the title. But then as time went on and more people read my story for me, I really wanted to call it Rubbish Girl. Because if you read the book, John Lennon called me when he saw that, and the day I met the Beatles in 1965, I had collected some of their trash during the press conference, and I was brought up to their room, and there was an incident there that wasn't really kind to me, but and he saw what was going on, and he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, for my memorabilia collection." And he goes, "No, it's rubbish." He goes, "I am going to call you Rubbish Girl."
Lovely.
Tony Barrow, years later, I was in Cannes at a music festival with my husband who was speaking, and Tony was there, as was George Martin. And Tony remembered John Lennon calling me Rubbish Girl because he was there at the Warwick Hotel.
Wow.
And, and so I wanted to really call it that. And everyone was against it but me. Because, what an honor even to be called Rubbish Girl.
Rubbish Girl.
Well, you know what? If nothing else, it would be a great title for a punk rock band, an all-female punk rock band.
Wouldn't it? Rubbish Girls. I saw someone ask, am I going to Beatle Fest? You know what?
Yes.
Mark Lapidus actually got in touch with me, and I am going the end of March to New Jersey.
Oh, good.
Great. I will. Are you going there? I know that you go.
We're not going to New Jersey, no. It's just a bridge too far, and it's freezing cold and blah, blah, blah.
My daughter lives in New York City, as my two grandsons, son-in-law. So for me to go to New Jersey and go stay with them, it's a lovely visit for me. I get to hug those grandkids. So yes, I am going to be there.
That's the most important thing. So do you have a copy of your book on your desk? You want to hold that up for folks?
Oh, thank you. I have my copy.
And so the title wound up being I Saw Them Standing There, and that is your original copy with all your original notes, right?
Yeah, this is mine, the one that I've worked with when I got the original copy. And I will say that's me in 1965, August 14th, the day after I met the Beatles, sitting on my bed at home. And my dad took this picture, and I'm reading A Spaniard in the Works. It's part of my story in the book because Neil Aspinall, after being called Rubbish Girl, and me thinking it's my precious memorabilia, gave me this book to add to my Beatles collection. So I'm going through on my bed. It had just come out or was about to come out. So let me hold this straight. And I must tell you, Apple Corps approved my cover in my book. I wrote to them and wanted to get permission because I always abided by all the rules. And so they even read some of the chapters and approved the book that I'm proud of. So
I bet you are.
Well, our publisher, Stephen Wilson, who is in New York, not New Jersey, he's going to be there. I'll make sure you guys get introduced.
Yes.
He's going to have our books. He runs an amazing company called Imagine and Wonder Publishing, and they've just launched something called goldenage60s.com. So you guys should definitely be in touch.
Yeah.
Stephen is the publisher of Angie's and my There Are Faces I Remember, which is 1001 pressed only. It's a coffee table book with a fantastic cover by Shannon and interior.
That's lovely.
168 celebrities, fans, whatever, and recollections of the Beatles from, oh gosh, Gene Simmons from Kiss to, Angie's recollections of all the people in
that
the
I've
universe.
met, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so Stephen will be there with that and Ticket to Ride and some other stuff. So I'll make sure that you guys get a cup of tea together.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So our regular viewers will know that our very special guests get their own personalized limerick, because Madam here is the limerick lady. And so if you are sitting comfortably, then we shall read it to you. Are you ready, Miss G?
Thank you.
Limerick time. Here we go. And a 1, 2, 3. Debbie Gendler, a lady
so dear.
Speak up.
Okay.
Louder.
Do you want me to start? All right.
Louder. See, it's live, but never mind. A 1, 2, 3. Debbie Gendler, a lady so dear, saw Ed Sullivan and Beatles were near. With a scream and a shout, as the whole world found out, Beatlemania truly was here. Ta-da!
Isn't that lovely? Thank you.
I'll email it to you.
Sometimes, please. Love it. Love it.
Well, the audience is having a ball. Thank you so much for all of your love and efforts and time and your wonderful book. I saw them standing there. You can find it at debbiegendler.com, and you can find Debbie on social media, and she will be breaking news at Beatlefest in New Jersey in March.
You can get it at Amazon. I don't sell my book on the website.
Oh, okay, but it points to Amazon.
I don't sell it on the website. Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, something like that. So I wanted to stay away from my sales. I felt like the book was indulgent enough, I mean,
I know.
I don't know. Maybe you need to talk to Stephen at Beatlefest and get it on Golden Age 60s.
Exactly. I will. I'll talk to him. I look forward to it and to meeting all your viewers, which will be a lot of fun. So thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. It's an honor to be on your show.
Oh, likewise having you. And this will be up later this afternoon on the front page of the McCartney Times at McCartney.com. And then later on today on our YouTube channel. So if you tuned in late or missed it, and you can find us on YouTube, McCartney.com, or replay it here on Facebook. And Stephen is saying, yes, definitely. He'd love to add a review on Golden Age 60s. So there we go. All right, kids. Well, thank you. And we'll see you all of a sudden. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.